The instant Jasmine Crockett stepped into the room. Trump signaled for security, but before they could reach her, she began speaking. It was barely 60 seconds, but everything shifted. What was meant to be another routine summit, another headline-grabbing appearance, another sea of MAGA hats and press cameras subtly jostling for prime angles, suddenly became something else. The Lone Star Leadership Forum, hosted at the K. Bailey Hutchison Convention Center in Dallas, had long been marked on political planners not because major revelations were expected, but because Donald Trump was scheduled to speak. And when Trump speaks, unpredictability follows. That morning, the lobby was buzzing campaign staff in crisp Navy suits, weaving through metal detectors. Press badges bouncing off their chests, and vendors unloading stacks of red caps, flag print tees, and even gold-colored bobbleheads of Trump himself. The ballroom doors opened later than scheduled, but the space filled up quickly, every chair occupied. With others standing along the walls, stretching for a clear view of the podium, the audience was diverse in age, if not ideology. 8 all execs seated next to Gen Z live streamers holding up smartphones. Some came for policy, others for the performance. All came anticipating that Trump would do what he always did: command the crowd, dominate the narrative, and show no mercy. Behind the scenes, the energy was tense. Whispers circulated, rumors of unannounced congressional guests. Security presence had quietly doubled. Plainclothes officers lingered at exits and stationed themselves around the perimeter. Then the lights dimmed. A booming voice, like a boxing MC, rang out. "Please welcome the 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump." He strolled on stage, hand lifted like a champion, trademark grin firmly in place. Thunderous applause followed, but not from everyone. Toward the back, a few stayed silent. One man let out a theatrical cough. Another turned his back. Trump moved slowly toward the lectern, scanning the audience like a king inspecting his court. He fired off a few joke swipes at Biden, digs at California, a jab at electric vehicles before even touching the summit's stated topic: the relationship between federal authority and state rights. Then came the moment. A figure appeared not from the stage entrance, nor from the general seating, but from the right side media corridor. Dressed in a white blazer and tan heels, she moved quietly, confidently. The room took a few moments to register her. Some squinted. A woman up front gasped. Is that Jasmine Crockett?" she whispered. It was indeed the first-term Congresswoman from Texas's 30th District. Known for sharp questioning during hearings and her fearless media presence, she had a reputation: bold, smart, unwilling to back down. But no one imagined she'd show up here, especially not mid-speech alone. Trump noticed her instantly. His flow broke. "What's this?" he asked, scanning her path. "Is this? Did we authorize that?" A murmur swelled. Phones came out. Security turned. Crockett didn't hesitate. She walked halfway down the side aisle and stopped, forcing her way forward, but refusing to retreat. A man wearing a patriotic necktie stood and shouted, "You don't belong here." Trump turned to the crew off stage and motioned. "Handle that," he said. "She's not cleared to be here." Security agents peeled off the wall, heading toward her. Crockett raised one hand, not like a protester, not like a politician, but palm up, gently, like someone requesting a chance to speak. "Just give me 1 minute," she called out, not yelling, but projecting enough to carry across the suddenly hushed room. 1 minute, then I'll go." The atmosphere tightened. No one moved. Trump's arm hovered awkwardly in the air, unsure whether to signal again or wait. Some in the crowd murmured. A few phones adjusted to focus on her. There was something in her voice, its steadiness, its quiet authority, that gave everyone pause. The 2 men in dark suits didn't stop, but they slowed. One pressed his earpiece, the other scanned the audience as if expecting a cue. No one was sure what this was: a disruption, a stunt, or something else entirely. Jasmine Crockett didn't budge. She wasn't theatrical. She wasn't defiant. She simply stood with calm determination, her gaze fixed on Trump, not hostile, just steady. It wasn't about protest. It was about presence. "I was invited," she stated, this time facing the crowd, "by Representative Ethan Bell. He couldn't make it today. But it would be valuable for me to observe in person." A voice from the media row shouted, "Do you have proof?" Crockett didn't respond. She looked back to Trump. "You speak of dialogue," she said. "Give me 60 seconds of mine." The guards hesitated. One looked toward the curtain, clearly awaiting further direction. Trump glanced at the audience, then back at her. His head tilted slightly. "This isn't your platform," he said into the mic. "You're not listed. You're not cleared. You want 60 seconds? Get a podcast." Scattered laughter rippled. A few clapped. Some nodded, but Crockett didn't waver. No eye roll, no smirk. She briefly turned to the crowd. "I'm not here to hijack anything. I'm I'm here because I still believe this country belongs to all of us, not just those we agree. With that, struck a nerve. The crowd stilled. More phones went up. Trump stepped back from the lectern, grumbling into the mic. I'm not doing this, motioning to the team again. Get her out. One of the guards edged forward, then a woman from the front row, in a denim jacket and silver hair, stood up. Let her talk, she said calmly, plainly, no shouting, just clear enough to carry. And then from a few rows back, another voice followed. Yeah, let her speak. The ripple wasn't massive, maybe 6 or 7 voices tops, but it was enough to pause the room, enough to jolt the moment off its pre-written track. Trump squinted into the audience. Really, we're just going to let someone hijack a stage and call it free speech now? But there was no significant resistance. Too many phones were recording. Acting. This wasn't a managed message anymore. It had become a shared, unscripted event, eventually. With an obvious air of reluctance, Trump gave a short wave toward the mic. All right, fine, he said. You've got 1 minute. Go ahead. Impress us. He stepped aside. Security froze. Crockett didn't rush. She made her way forward slowly, stopping short of the stairs. She didn't try to grab the podium. Instead, she turned to the crowd. Clasping her hands in front of her, I'm not here to talk about legislation, she began. Not today. Because this moment, it's not about bills or policies. It's about people, about how we speak, about how we shut down the moment we hear a name we disagree with. She paused, taking in the crowd. I grew up just 10 minutes away, South Dallas. I rode the DART train past this convention center every day to get to school. Never thought I'd be standing inside it, asking to be heard. Some leaned in. Others stayed still, uncertain of where this was going. I'm not here to persuade, she said. I don't expect applause. I don't need agreement. I just hope folks remember we're not adversaries. We're not foreigners to each other. We're Americans. And if hearing a different voice in the room is too much to tolerate, then we've already lost far more than just one election. Silence. But it wasn't awkward. It was deliberate. Even Trump stayed quiet, arms crossed, his face unreadable. Somewhere in the back, someone whispered under their breath, but it went nowhere. Crockett glanced around, nodded slightly, and stepped back. That's all I had to say. But the crowd wasn't ready to shift gears just yet. The quiet that followed was dense, not angry, not uncertain, just heavy, like the whole room was catching up to what had happened. Few blinked at each other, unsure whether to applaud, push back, or stay quiet. In a place built for outbursts and conflict, her restraint had broken the expected tempo. Trump stood to the side of the lectern, arms still folded, body language notably muted. No gesturing, no smirks. He was simply watching her. Crockett remained. Below the stage, not posturing, not surveying for fanfare. She looked almost relieved, as if what she'd said wasn't about theatrics, but necessity. Then a soft clap began back right corner, cautious at first. Then a few more hands joined in. It wasn't thunderous, not even close. But it punctured the silence. Trump stepped up again, interrupting the moment. All right, he said. She spoke. That's America, even if you didn't want to hear it. His tone had an edge, part sarcasm, part resignation. But even he could feel it. Something in the energy of the room had shifted. No shouting, no dragging anyone out. Yet it landed harder than the usual fireworks. Then another voice rose. A man, middle row, late 40s, red golf shirt with a small Texas flag embroidered on the sleeve. Congresswoman, he said, clear and firm. I don't agree with much of what you believe, but that ... That was better than how most folks put it. Much respect. Crockett didn't beam or grin. She gave a quiet nod, measured and dignified. Trump blinked, caught off guard. He raised an eyebrow, turned slightly toward the man. Aren't you full of surprises today? He quipped with a chuckle that didn't quite land. And just like that, the moment began to shift back to normal. Stage staff whispered through headsets, trying to decide if they should move on with the next panel or let the room settle. Journalists hurried to upload clips. Security, still hovering nearby, finally loosened their stances. Jasmine moved back along the wall. No one blocked her, no one escorted her. She spotted an empty chair near the exit, sat quietly composed, not smug, not shaking, just still. But she hadn't vanished from attention. A reporter leaned across the rope line toward an aide. Well, she'll speak to press after this? Is she issuing a statement? The aide didn't reply. On stage, Trump fidgeted. For the first time that afternoon, the spotlight wasn't focused on him. It wasn't because of something he'd done, it was because of something someone else had said, on his turf. During his moment, he tapped the mic again. Well, he said, guess that's our civics class for the day. Can we get back to actually fixing things now? Scattered laughter. A few claps. The audience seemed to want its usual rhythm back, but it hadn't quite returned. Just as Trump prepared to restart his message, another voice rang out, not loud, not hostile. Why not respond to what she said? Gasps. Phones lifted. Trump. froze, eyes searching the crowd, but no one identified themselves. The voice had come from somewhere in the center, but nobody stood. "I don't have to respond," he said at last, tone clipped. "She's got her take. I've got mine. I'm the one who was scheduled." A few claps, some half laughs. Then one more surprise. Jasmine stood again, calmly. She stepped back into the side aisle, not toward the exit, but back toward the crowd. "I didn't come here for attention," she said gently. "But maybe, just maybe, some of you needed to hear a different voice today. Not better, not perfect, just ... different." And then she left quietly. No reporters swarming, no security clearing a path. She exited the same way she entered, steady, silent. But what happened in that room didn't stay there. By the time Jasmine Crockett reached the hallway and stepped into the bright side lot behind the convention center, her phone had already vibrated 7 times. No calls, just texts, mostly journalists. A staffer, 2 fellow representatives. Jasmine glanced at her phone but didn't reply it yet. Her mind was still racing, even though her expression stayed composed. Inside the hall, the panel tried to recover its rhythm. Trump dove back into his prepared remarks: immigration, border enforcement, crime rates in liberal states, but it felt off, like trying to accelerate on worn-out tires. The momentum was gone. Even the audience's responses were out of sync, as if their thoughts were still caught in the silence that followed Crockett's speech. What made her moment resonate so deeply wasn't the content, it was the delivery. No shouting, no grandstanding. It's just calm, direct words spoken with clarity, like someone who was finished screaming and even more exhausted from being ignored. By the time the event came to a close and the crowd poured into the lobby, her entrance had already gone viral. Clusters of people gathered around the escalators, rewatching the clip on their phones. Attendees who hadn't even been inside were asking to see it. It didn't fit the usual definition of dramatic, but it carried weight, real, lingering weight, the kind that doesn't fade with the exit music. Roughly 2 hours later, the first video made it to Twitter. It was shaky, recorded from behind the media pit, but it caught everything: her entrance, Trump's stumble, the brief speech, and the man in the red polo's unexpected remark. Within 10 minutes, it had already racked up over 12,000 likes. The replies came quickly. "Didn't think I'd agree with Jasmine Crockett today, but damn, respect. This is how you shift perspectives. Not with noise, with truth." Trump had been left flat-footed, mouth half open. Was this coordinated? If it was, it had been executed flawlessly. Suddenly, the Texas political landscape looked very different. By the evening, the cable networks had picked up the story, not just the usual ones, but nearly all of them. One Sharon Reed, Congresswoman delivers rare moment of unity in divided forum. Another called it unscripted political courage. Breaks through the noise, but not everyone was praising her. Certain far-right pundits blasted her as manipulative, claiming the whole thing was a pre-planned stunt to gain momentum ahead of the midterms. One radio host scoffed, "You don't just walk into a Trump event without someone paving the way. This was orchestrated." Still, something about that accusation didn't land. If it had been staged, it would have felt cleaner, flashier, more curated, but it didn't. It felt like someone stepping into a hostile room, asking without shouting, to simply be acknowledged. Later that night, back at her Dallas apartment, Jasmine finally sat down with her team. "I didn't plan for it to go like that," she said. "You didn't plan to get applause either," one aide responded. "But you got some." Jasmine rubbed her forehead. "I wasn't hoping for applause. I just wanted them to see me as a person, not a headline, not the opposition." Her communications director, Ruben Slona, fast-talking strategist from Garland, shook his head as he scrolled through the flood of posts. "People are calling it a turning point," he said. "Even folks who hate politics are sharing it." Jasmine looked up, weary. "That's the saddest part," she whispered. "All I did was ask to speak for 60 seconds without raising my voice, and now it's a national headline." Ruben stopped. "Maybe that's what people have been waiting for. Just one voice that doesn't need to yell." While her staff scrambled to manage the viral wave, another shift had quietly begun back at the convention center. The mood hadn't returned to normal. Maybe it wouldn't. What was supposed to be a day full of sound bites and certainty had taken an unplanned detour into something raw and human. People weren't leaving the building talking about tax brackets or state budgets. They were talking about that minute, about that silence, about the look on people's faces when she said, "We're not enemies." What stuck with them wasn't the clapping, it was what came immediately after. Near the coffee stand between panels, a quiet group had formed. Texans from all over, ranchers out of Amarillo, retired teachers from Plano, a couple of young vets from El Paso. No one filming, no shouting, just conversation. One of the veterans, a guy named Jonah Krill, leaned against a column with his arms crossed. "I'm a Trump voter," he said plainly. "Always have been." But what she said did landed. The way she carried herself. I felt that. The retired teacher beside him, Ruth Ashby, nodded slowly. "Reminded me of my sister," she said. Tough as nails, but good. Always just wanted someone to hear her out. Jonah shrugged. Didn't agree with her politics, but I respected her. Maybe that's where we have to start. Respect, not agreement, Ruth answered. Nearby, a younger woman in a MAGA hat stood listening quietly. She didn't join in, but her face said she was thinking about it. Even in the next panel inside the main conference room, the shift lingered. The moderators tried steering the discussion back toward Texas job growth. But halfway through, State Senator Colin Greer went off script. I wasn't going to bring this up, he said, but if we move on like that moment didn't happen, we're not being honest. He paused. What Congresswoman Crockett did, whether you agree with her or not, that was courage. But I still believe courage counts in public service. The applause that followed wasn't thunderous, but it was genuine, not polite. It's not automatic real. Someone had finally acknowledged what everyone else was pretending hadn't shifted. Later, something else surprising unfolded. Outside in the parking area where food trucks were still serving brisket and lemonade, Crockett crossed paths with a small group of attendees while heading to her car. She could have kept walking, could have ignored them, but she paused when she heard someone call her name. Congresswoman? She turned. A man in a gray polo and worn Wrangler jeans jogged toward her, unsure, a little hesitant. Just wanted to say I didn't come here to listen to anyone from your side. He said, winded, but I did, and I'm glad I did. She studied him for a moment, certain where this was going. My name's Kenton McBride, he said, extending a hand. Run a roofing business in Temple. Voted Republican in every election since I turned 18. But what you said, it hit different. She took his hand and gave it a firm shake. Listened, she said. That's more than most try to do. Behind them, 2 more people approached, including the woman from inside, the first one who had said, let her speak. Her name was Teresa Givens's grandmother, a former nurse, and someone who hadn't voted Democrat since Bill Clinton was on the ballot. I just wanted you to know you weren't alone in there, Teresa said with a warm smile. I didn't agree with every word, but I was proud you showed up. Jasmine's voice faltered slightly. Thank you, she whispered. Maybe it was that stillness again, that strange, grounded calm she carried that lowered the volume even of those who didn't support her. But not everyone outside the convention was ready for that kind of dialogue. Backstage in the private lounge, Trump was pacing. He hated being blindsided. More than that, he hated losing command of a space that was supposed to be his turf. The hell authorized her, he barked, locking eyes with one of his aides. She wasn't on the schedule, not listed as a speaker, nothing. The aide, a jittery young man already sweating through his collar, stammered, We think she came in using Congressman Bell's guest credentials, sir. Technically, she was allowed. Technically, Trump snapped. Hackers, get in technically. So do con artists. I want a name. I want to know who let this happen. He stopped mid-stride and turned toward a small backstage monitor still playing a loop of the footage. Jasmine's face paused, mid-sentence steady, composed, completely unfazed. She's too calm, Trump muttered. You see that? Not even a quiver. That wasn't improv. That was prepared. Scripted. The aide stayed silent. And the audience? What the hell was that? Some of them clapped. They were just caught off guard, sir. It was exactly. Trump slammed a water bottle onto the table and took a long swig, trying to shake the feeling of slipping control. Nearby, his senior advisor, Alan Rensley, never shy about saying what others wouldn't, finally spoke. Look, Alan said, you didn't lose the room, but you didn't command it either. That moment, it's everywhere now. It's Twitter, Facebook, TikTok. And no one's talking about immigration. They're talking about her. Trump scowled. She's not the future. She's noise. Alan shrugged. Maybe so, but noise spreads faster than policy. Trump waved him off, sinking into the leather couch with a huff. She played it differently, Alan added. Didn't yell, didn't accuse. She just showed up like she belonged there. There was a long pause. Then Trump leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. But, he said next, even caught his team off guard. She had them for a second. I'll give her that. Alan blinked. You respect what she did? Trump didn't reply directly, just stared at the monitor again, where the news now looped her words over B-roll footage. I respect the move, he said. Doesn't mean I won't rip it apart. Outside the lounge, his campaign staff scrambled to figure out the messaging. Should they discredit her as a publicity seeker, label her a gatecrasher, or pretend it hadn't happened and hope it faded in 2 days? But ignoring it was no longer viable. The clip had already hit the primetime circuit newsline weekly, Front Point Live. Even a subdued reaction video from a conservative podcast had gone viral. She didn't flip the room, the host said, but she reminded us there's a difference between strength and volume. Meanwhile, Trump's social media team tried shifting focus, posting about job stats, the border, gas prices. Every third comment was still about her. Screenshots of her standing alone in that aisle, hand raised, had become the symbol of the day. His base wasn't abandoning him, but they weren't on the same page either. Some framed it as Trump showing class by letting her speak. Others thought he'd been too soft. A few demanded to know why she wasn't immediately challenged on stage. That ambiguity, that moment of hesitation, irked him deeply. Because like it or not, Jasmine Crockett had achieved what most couldn't. She got him to respond, not through shouting, not through aggression, but by walking right into a room. He controlled him, simply asking for a minute, and it worked. Outside the convention center, the internet was running wild. The story fractured in every direction imaginable. As the Texas sun dropped below the skyline, her name was trending in 4 major U.S. cities and climbing. This wasn't just political echo chambers talking. It had broken wide open. People who'd never watched a congressional hearing in their lives were now quoting her 60-second speech on Instagram and Facebook. Influencers far outside the political world, fashion vloggers, fitness creators, even a popular BBQ critic were reposting the clip. One wrote, "This is how you speak in a room that never wanted to hear you." One TikTok stood out, her speech layered over a slowed-down piano track, ending with the moment the man in the red shirt said, "Respect." It racked up over 2 million views in just 8 hours. But with all the praise came backlash. Staged it. Total performance. She's just hunting for the spotlight. A conservative host pointed directly into the camera, shouting, "Wake up, America. This was theater. Don't believe it for a second. You think she just waltzed in by chance?" This was coordinated, built for virality. Soon, trolls joined. Anonymous accounts started attacking her voting history, her appearance, her character. Some fabricated claims that she barged in without clearance, that she threatened staff. But those fell apart fast. Security footage, leaked by someone inside, showed her calmly entering, flashing her badge, walking through metal detectors like any registered guest. Still, the narrative was splitting fast. Cable networks tried to catch up. Some booked her for interviews. Others debated if giving her airtime was legitimizing a breach of etiquette. One guest pundit declared, "This wasn't bravery, it was performative activism at its most polished." And then something unexpected happened. People who usually stayed silent on politics, nurses, truckers, teachers started speaking up. Long, heartfelt posts began surfacing. One, from a man named Brent in Lubbock, stood out. "I was there at that summit. Been voting Republican since I could vote. Got a Trump sticker on my F-150. But when that woman spoke, something in me stopped. I didn't align with everything she said, but I paid attention. Maybe it's time we all quiet down for a moment and just listen." That post spread like wildfire. Jasmine saw it herself. She didn't comment, didn't share, but she tapped a quiet like. Meanwhile, her team was doing damage control behind the scenes. Her inbox had ballooned, overflowing with booking requests, interview pitches, podcast offers, and speaking slots. Some were sincere, others felt like bait, and the threats. Yeah, those came too. Enough to involve Capitol Police. Enough that Ruben, her press manager, started carrying a folder labeled simply, "In case, Jasmine." She stayed mostly silent that first day. No flood of tweets, no impromptu press huddle, just a single, crisp statement from her office. "I asked for 60 seconds. In a room where I wasn't expected, I spoke. That's all. The rest is noise." But silence has a funny power of its own. It makes people fill in the gaps. And in that vacuum, the public kept projecting meaning onto the moment. A late-night comedian cracked, Crockett walked. Into a Trump event, calmer than a yoga teacher on lavender tea, and somehow, she's the threat. It got a huge laugh. But beneath the punchline, a truth people were grappling with. The moment didn't fit the usual cable news templates. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't pointed fingers. She didn't even stick around for a Q&A. She just asked for 1 minute. And whether she liked it or not, that 1 minute had turned her into a symbol of something no one had quite defined. But deep inside party offices across the country, the mood was less poetic. What mattered now wasn't the public's reaction. It was the party machines. On the second floor of a low-rise building in Arlington, under the dull glow of flickering fluorescents, the Democratic Regional Strategy Team was still working. Into the night. Phones on silent. Coffee long gone cold. Laptops open. Jasmine Crockett's name appearing in bullet points every few slides. "She's got guts," said Miriam Noland, a seasoned strategist with 3 presidential cycles under her belt. But let's be real. This just painted a bullseye on her back. Across the table, Dev Patel, a rising party organizer, leaned forward. Or maybe it's a spotlight. Independents are watching, even some centrists. "We'd be fools not to harness this momentum." "Sure," Miriam replied. "But that assumes she wants to be used for something bigger." She hasn't returned a single call from National. "She will," Dev said. "She just lit a fire in the middle of a thunderstorm. She's probably still figuring out how loud the thunder's going to be." Meanwhile, a few hundred miles away in a Tulsa office filled with Fox News murmurs and takeout containers, The GOP media coordination team was not so generous. They were tense, agitated, scrubbing through clips, reading polls. "Shift in real time." She made him look unprepared, said Julian Cross, a no-nonsense advisor with a reputation for ruthless narrative control. "We cannot afford that twice." She was invited, another staffer muttered under their breath, by a Republican, no less. "And that," Julian cut in, "is what we bury. As far as our base is concerned," she wandered in off the street, but the video Julian's jaw tightened. "Truth doesn't trend, emotion does." Back in Dallas, Jasmine sat alone in her living room. Still wearing the same white blazer from the forum, a mug of untouched tea sat on the table. Her phone kept buzzing. She didn't want to answer it, not yet. A voicemail transcript popped up. It was from her mother. "You did good, baby. Don't let them twist it." You spoke like a woman who was raised right. That made her smile, but only briefly. A knock at the door pulled her out of the moment. It was Reuben. He didn't wait to be invited in. He just came in, opened his laptop, and sat down. "We've got to talk," he said. "There's a town hall in Oklahoma requesting you next. Weak PBS wants a sit-down. And believe it or not, Fox is asking for a segment." Jasmine didn't respond right away. "I didn't do this for attention," she said quietly. "I just couldn't sit there through another speech about real Americans as if I'm not one of them." Reuben nodded slowly. "And you didn't shout to prove it. That's why it worked." Silence hung between them. "Do you regret it?" he finally asked. Jasmine inhaled. "I regret that it felt rare. I regret that speaking calmly, telling the truth without shouting, is seen as radical now." Upstairs, a soft buzzing came from the guest room. Her niece was staying over, still asleep. The TV was on. A news anchor's voice bled through the floorboards, an unusual calm, a rare political moment that left even the former president without a quick retort. Somewhere in D.C., a campaign consultant was scribbling down lines for an ad. Somewhere in Florida, a donor pulled funds from a candidate who had clapped, and in dozens of political circles left, right, and in between, one quiet question lingered beneath all the chatter. If 1 minute of sincerity could shake a room like that, what could 5 do? But while think tanks and party strategists obsessed over the ripple effect, Jasmine had already turned her gaze to what came next. 2 mornings later, she sat tucked into a corner booth of a small cafe in Oak Cliff, a hoodie pulled halfway over her face. She was hoping for 1 hour of peace before the interviews began again, before the noise came roaring back. "Doesn't last when a country decides you've become a moment." The barista recognized her, didn't say a word, just nodded. Then a young woman in scrubs entered, hesitated at the counter, then walked to her table. "Are you, you're her, right?" she asked nervously. Jasmine looked up, exhausted but kind. "I am." The woman smiled, her eyes glossy. "I watched your speech 3 times yesterday. My dad, he's a trucker, never voted for anyone but Trump. But when he heard what you said, got real quiet. You just said she's got guts. Reminds me of your grandma." Jasmine blinked, caught off guard. The woman set a folded piece of paper on the table. "He doesn't do Instagram or Twitter, so he asked me to write this for you." Before Jasmine could reply, she was already walking away. Jasmine opened the note. It was written in clean, careful handwriting. "I don't agree with you, but I'd listen to you. It's more than I can say for most." Later that afternoon, Jasmine Crockett sat down for an interview with a local station. The journalist, Shelby Dunn, had spent more than 2 decades covering Texas politics. She wasn't hunting for scandal, just searching for truth. "I've been in more political rooms than I can count," Shelby said, recorder resting on the arm of her chair. "But I've never seen one freeze like that, like the way they did for you." Jasmine paused before responding. "I wasn't trying to stop the room," she said carefully. "I just wanted to show up and say something I'd never hear at those kinds of events. That it's okay to disagree without assuming someone hates this country." Shelby tilted her head, intrigued. "Were you scared?" Jasmine looked away for a beat. "I was aware," she said slowly, "aware of the risks, aware of how it might be perceived, aware that I was alone in that room, but scared? Not exactly. I've been in much smaller rooms with men twice as loud." She gave a soft, wry smile. "What scared me more was the thought of staying quiet, letting that moment pass me by." The tone shifted. "You think it would have landed the same way if you'd raised your voice?" Shelby asked. "If you'd gone full attack mode?" Jasmine didn't hesitate. "No. If I'd come in swinging, that room would have tuned out. They barely made space for me, as it was if I'd led with anger. I wouldn't have made it past the first sentence. But because I didn't shout, they had a choice. They could walk out, or they could listen. Most of them stayed." Shelby leaned back in her chair, and now, Jasmine sighed, "I don't want to be a headline. I don't want to be a moment. I want it to be a beginning. If even a few people walked away thinking, maybe I should listen before I assume, then that's enough." Across the country, reactions kept flooding in from both sides of the aisle. A pastor in Nebraska invited her to speak. A civics teacher in Arizona asked her to record a message for their students. A group of veterans in Ohio posted a video thanking her not for speaking out, but for choosing restraint when she could have chosen heat. Of course, the criticism kept coming too. She's just another media creation. She's branding calm like it's a new political product. She walked into the lion's den and acted like it was brunch. Flinch, because something had shifted, and it wasn't just about her. In conversations happening over kitchen tables, inside corner barbershops, across union halls, and at gas station counters, the question wasn't whose side is she on, it was why did that feel so rare? Why did one moment of clarity in a room full of chaos feel so different? And maybe that was the real story. Not her bravery, not her party affiliation, but the uncomfortable truth that we've become so addicted to yelling that quiet now feels revolutionary. But Jasmine knew the spotlight would fade. Moments like this never last unless someone decides to carry the torch. 3 weeks later, the headlines had moved on. Her story no longer led cable news or trended on Twitter. A few interviews aired, some think pieces made the rounds. Political panels tried to squeeze out one last hot take before pivoting to the next crisis, but something lingered. The moment had staying power not because it was explosive, but because it was different. In church basements and city council meetings, the name Jasmine Crockett came up without prompting. A pastor in Topeka mentioned her in a sermon about grace under pressure. A debate teacher in Fresno posed a question to their class. Was it the content of her message or the delivery that stopped the room? And in a small-town diner in Lafayette, Louisiana, retired mechanic named Howard McClure leaned over his coffee cup and told his friends she didn't even raise her voice, but half the room sat up straighter. I can't stop thinking about that. In an era where Volume 2 often drowns out value, Jasmine Crockett had managed to cut through simply by refusing to scream, and she wasn't basking in it. She wasn't chasing cameras or flying to Washington to cash in. She was back home, in her district, walking past cracked sidewalks and yards with porch chairs that told stories, meeting with school teachers, hosting listening sessions at community centers, talking to small business owners still nursing wounds from the pandemic. Her team pushed her to go big. They wanted national media. They wanted to ride the momentum. Fundraisers, Rubin said. Speaking tours, features. Now's the time. But she shook her head. Let them know I'm still here, she told Rubin. Let them know I didn't turn into a headline. I'm still a neighbor. It would have been easy to chase the fame, to book the circuits, to let someone else write the next chapter for her. But she knew better. The country didn't need another viral clip. It needed something more lasting. It needed examples, not perfect ones, just real ones. She never said it out loud, but she felt the weight now. Once you show people a new way to be heard, they start expecting it. It's from you and from everyone else. The backlash never disappeared. Pundits accused her of softening to win centrists. Party insiders whispered that she'd gone off message. One prominent Democratic official even told her, "You're a fighter, Jasmine. You're supposed to bring fire, not tea and silence." But that's not what Dallas taught her. Room had confirmed what she'd always suspected. People don't always need saviors. They need space. A pause. A crack in the noise wide enough for their own thinking to find its way in. And sometimes that only happens when the yelling stops long enough for someone like her to be heard. In her final interview, before stepping back from the spotlight, a young reporter asked softly, "What do you hope people remember about that day?" Jasmine didn't answer right away. She took her time. Finally, she said, "I want them to remember what it felt like when nobody was shouting." She glanced at the reporter, then at the camera. "I want them to remember that just for a minute, a room full of people who don't agree on much actually listened to each other." The reporter nodded, moved, then added, "And what would you say to someone out there who thinks speaking up isn't worth the risk?" Jasmine looked right into the lens. "I'd say silence is a risk too. And the longer we pretend that only the loudest voices matter, the more we drown out the people who actually have something worth saying." Outside the studio, her car was idling in the lot. Another neighborhood visit, another front porch, another knock on a door with questions she couldn't answer in sound bites. But she was ready, because this was never about virality. It wasn't about headlines or spin cycles. It was about showing up every single time, especially in rooms where the odds were stacked against her. She opened the car door, took a steadying breath, stepped into the noise again, risking everything for just one more quiet moment. And maybe, just maybe, that's the message we all needed right now. Not to be louder, but to speak in a way that means more.